Beautiful. So nice to connect with everybody. And yeah, it's so nice to connect with, well, one of my best friends actually. And we've known each other for, I don't know how many years now? I think it's about 5, 6 years now or more.
Yeah, about that.
And yeah, Larry's been a pillar for me in someone that I can bounce things off and really I'll get sound, solid, and maybe advice that I don't want to look at because it's my topics. So I like to bounce things off Larry. So I felt it was really the time that we come together. We've done something before. And I just feel like we should come together to really see where I'm at, see where you're at, Larry, and to really see what comes through in this conversation. I'll call it a conversation.
Right.
So yeah, so if you want to introduce yourself, Larry, so nice to
So,
connect.
good to see you, Damien. And yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Larry Pavlosky. I'm an American. I live in New York State, and I am trained as a pediatrician. But I do pediatrics in a whole bigger way than just the Western medical paradigm. And I love looking at the spiritual aspects, the emotional, the psychological, the mental, the social, the physical aspects of health. And I don't ask my patients to do anything that I don't personally do for myself. And I get a lot of learning and a lot of education from working with kids and working with families. Children have so much to offer in regards to what our shadows are and what's in our blind spots. So yeah, I think we knew each other. I think we met before COVID. I think it was maybe fall of 2018. Or yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's so. It's 6.5 years about.
excellent. And we supported each other between during the
Oh,
COVID as all my topics were opening. Yes, for anyone who doesn't know me, so I'm Damien Wynne, and I'm working with really embodiment and working with what's, our shadow and genetic imprints from the ancestors, trauma that's been there from birth, childhood up to now, and also in the collective. So it's really about uh, you know, your soul is solid, it's whole already, and then it drops into this vessel, and then the genetic imprints open up, and then certain topics or certain belief systems take over how we live our lives or make decisions. So just before this, we were talking, and you brought up a very beautiful, yeah, conversation, let's say, or the starting of a conversation. Larry, do you want to ask that question or present it again?
so for many people, uh, March, April of 2020, when the COVID era began, they were somewhat hoodwinked. They couldn't understand how this happened. How did we get to a place where the world could be shut down the way it was shut down? How is it that people were able to be obedient and subservient and trusting of authority so easily? And some people have thrown out the ideas. Well, it's a crisis. We're afraid. There's a lot of anxiety. We need people to lead us. But Damien, I've always wondered, how did we as a consciousness arrive at that place where we could be so easily maneuvered and so easily manipulated without the critical thinking that defines us as humans? We're not we're animals, but we're not core animals. We rise to a development that allows us to develop consciousness and awareness and ownership of who we are and what we believe in. And so I've been asking for the last 4 years, how did we get here? And I don't know if you want me to say why I think we've gotten here, or
Or
so.
go?
Um, how is it that young adults and adults could listen to something outside of them and not question it and just believe it? And it took me back to my days as earlier as a pediatrician, watching over the last 30 years how we have parented our kids. And when you and I were kids, and people older than our generation were kids, there was this dictatorial parenting. Do as I say. There was yelling, there was screaming, there were orders, and we survived it, but it scarred us. And then you saw over the generations the pendulum swing to the other way, where it became more permissive. Where over the last 30 years, Damien, I would see parents actually asking permission if they could parent their kids. Um, can you put on your coat? Okay. This kind of gentleness to the point of losing authority. And, the kid in many of those situations would not really abide by the parents' wishes. And in that model came this idea of saving, rescuing, fixing, correcting, and preventing the children from feeling any discomfort. I don't want my kid to feel bad. I started hearing that 25, 30 years ago, uh, and watching that parenting style. And when a child struggled, the parent would fix it. Or if a child needed an answer, the parent would solve it and the parent would correct it. And so what I started to see over several generations was this attitude of, I'm going to save my child from experiencing 50% of life, which is discomfort. And so the child was brought up without skills to manage a struggle, to manage discomfort, to manage ways of getting through difficulty, because the parent was swooping in with answers, with solutions, fixing it, correcting it. And so over time, the young children became young adults who had no skills. And they relied on outside authorities to give them the answers. And then with the advent of cell phones, smartphones, video games, Siri, right? I recently heard a story of a child who was in class and said to the teacher, Siri, how do you spell? And the teacher looked at the kid and said, excuse me, what did you call me? Oh, sorry. When I can't spell something at home, I just say, Siri, can you spell? And so the struggles are lost, and there's this dependency on the outside. And so fast forward to 2020, and we can fill in gaps along the way, but fast forward to 2020, we had several generations of people who naturally just trusted, who naturally didn't question because they didn't have to, because they were serially given answers, corrected, fixed, solved, and they had easy access to what they perceived were answers. And so what happens when these adults are placed in situations where there's no one that they know and love to give them the answers? So then they have to transfer the authority to someone else who they have to trust, because the skills to actually challenge what's being said are not there, because it's all being dumped into them. So if, and then of course, how do we get out of this? We have to change the way we parent our kids. And that's really essentially where I'm coming from.
Larry, I really apologize. The internet broke here. Unfortunately, this happens in Kenya. Um, so yeah, you were talking. Yeah, I got to the point with Siri and how the children were not were affected by the way they were schooled by their parents. Oh, I apologize.
Right. So essentially, what I was saying is that what ends up happening when the young adults are not around their loved ones, or not around those that they trust, um, and they're in a pickle, they're in a situation where they don't know the answers, they don't know how to get the answers, they're more easily going to trust an authority, because the critical skills to actually question or evaluate or contemplate or consider what they're being told or what they're seeing, they're not there. And so they just transfer their authority over to someone else. And, so again, I'm not saying this is the only reason we are where we are, but I think it's a big piece. And the question I ask is, well, if this is the case, if this is true, how do we go forward? What's the next steps? And we can talk about that as we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, the pandemic for me was incredible awakening, and it made me sit and face things which was maybe I never sat with before. And it was more of a great awakening for me. That was my personal experience, a tough one, but it brought up issues in me. And it's interesting, you're talking about the parenting skills. And I would go back even further in, as I'm sure you would as well, about the genetics, about, the grandfather, grandmother parenting skills. And I remember even as a child, like speaking out as a young child about sexual abuse that was happening in my school. And I remember the parents just were like blank looking at me like, what are you talking about? So the system was switched off already, desensitized already, as it happens when we're abused. We cannot hear, feel, see what we were not ready to. And when I start going on this real journey of self-discovering, okay, who am I? What's in my system? Where's my thoughts? Where's my belief systems coming from? I realized that the whole thing was a lie. It was based on a lie, and there wasn't much truth in the system. And when I start really dissecting in the last years, I realized, so where is the truth? Where's the truth? Where's the truth? And it's interesting, I'm here in Kenya, and I had to go back to the archetypes of nature to find the purest blueprint to mirror to my system, say, okay, the rest is just programs. The whole thing is programs. So the disconnection from creation for me is going back like generation after generation. It's gone back through my genetics and the desensitization and the separation from self, from creation as we are creators. So I feel the whole thing is an opportunity for us to really unprogram ourselves. And that's really what's been working with, or I've been working with over the last years, is to find out where is this programming coming from? Where's the root of it coming from? And then where am I? Where is my consciousness? Where is creation in relationship to it? So it's sort of mirroring that into my system and through the genetics. And I realized that most of this programming is coming from way, way back. And it's a dissociation that's been there all the way back in the genetics and in the collective. So I remember during the pandemic, I was living in Athens at the time, and I was like, I thought, okay, they're rebels, they're always out marching, they're protesting. I felt very safe there. And I was like, what happened here? I feel like, wow, they completely folded. And then when I looked at the system, I realized why they folded so fast. And that was because in their genetics, there was the plague very recent in their system, just a few generations back. So this opened up in their system, like in the whole collective of the Greek system. And they were obeying everything. They were following the rules. They were even reporting on each other. I was like so shocked. But when I looked into the system, I wasn't shocked. I realized, okay, I understand it. I have compassion for it. And and this was really almost like a battle in my system all along, as we used to talk about it, how people would fold so easily, but really how much programming is in oneself and how that programming is operating us, or to make decisions, to not see, not hear, and not feel. So since then, I've been working with really, as we used to speak about it before, if you want to change a system, change yourself, make a new system. And for me, it's like, energy cannot be created or destroyed in a way. So it's to find always, for me, it's always about finding the system which is the purest, which is the blueprint. And for that, I couldn't find it in my ancestors. I couldn't find it around me. I needed to go back to nature. I needed to go back to different archetypes of living in Greece. So I was going back to different ancient archetypes, which was giving me blueprints of a leader because I realized it wasn't in my system. It was in my soul level, but not in my system. And I realized I was making decisions from dissociation or from other people's belief systems. So for me, it's really been the embodiment part is about, all this information is within me, within my genetics. And it's interesting. Years ago, I was told, the universe is like a game. And then it was interesting as all these different ways of working with the universe started to come in for me. And that's where I started to realize that we are systems, everything's different systems around us, and everything is creation on a source level. And it's all the same, no matter what way you go, but there is different systems. And then when you connect with a system, how to operate in that system, how to bring it back into coherence, and then how to open a system or recreate. Um, I realized that we can really, really change our lives. But for me, it was really to bring in consciousness of my genetic place because we are spirit coming into this vessel. And when we come down into the vessel, all the genetic stories start. Because, like it or not, my ancestors are in me. And I need to honor that I am the son of my mom on the left-hand side, my dad on the right-hand side. And once I go into that state, then all the information starts coming up in me. And then I am the one in the ancestral line that can change the system, that can do it different. And for me, there's once the genetics is set up correctly, it gives us the opportunity to change the system within us. So yeah, there's so many different keys here.
Sure. I want to just pick at one of the things that you said that was a little buzzword for me, and that the word is abuse. And in the system, the levels of abuse that are in the generations. And you know, I kind of want to look at why there are people who automatically trust authority, and why there are people like me and others who, as soon as they see authority, they know not to trust. And I think both perspectives come from some level of either ancestral abuse, trauma, or this world abuse or trauma, or both. And I know that from, I often say that I think I probably came into the world already not trusting authority. Like it was in my past lives. It was in my agreement to come into the world in the first place. Like I don't want to be here, and I don't trust that I'm coming in the right place. So I can't trust why you're bringing me into this world at this time, in this incarnation. So, but I look at, you know, I because of my own personal traumas and neglects and abuses, I never trusted authority. So if I were to see an authority doing something that was out of sync with nature, that was not congruent with my truth or a truth that I perceived, I knew it right away. I smelled it, I tasted it, I felt it. And of course, as I got older, I had to find ways to, smooth out the edges about how I responded to, that incongruity. But then I look at, people who automatically trust authority, and I realize that they're no different than I am in having been either abused or violated, or in some way, at the hands of an authority. And, having done a lot of pediatric trauma in my practice, as well as my own process, you learn that when children are abused or violated, they do everything they can to want the guardian, the adult, the parent, the grandparent, to love them, and will devote all of their love to and invest in please, I know you'll never do it again. I know you'll never do it again. And so there's this blind trust. And so when you get to the point where you have a tyrannical, totalitarian, dictatorial setting, as we have had during the COVID years, there's a blind spot. And that is that we can't possibly believe that the abuser would do it again. And so we have to transfer that trust and that love to the authority because A, we're not looking at our own inner trauma pattern, and certainly whatever is in the genetic line that's been going on for perhaps generations. And so there's a willingness and an inability at the same time. There's a willingness to accept and an inability to even fathom that the abuse pattern is being relived again. And so, at least I know what's going on in the States. We're seeing so many people who blindly went and then realized, oh my God, we got hurt. We got injured. We trusted. We have family members and friends who died. We lost our business. We didn't have to. We lost relationships. We didn't have to. And that's allowing people to actually begin a certain shadow work, might you say, or a certain awakening, I think is the right word, to those patterns that have been in the generations that have been accepted and disassociated from. And because, I mean, you and I both know that when you're traumatized, the coping mechanism is to disassociate. It's a given. It has to happen because your soul needs to find a way to find safety, because in the physical moment or in the emotional moment, it can't find that safety. So we have a lot of trauma work to do, and to just say to people, well, you need to wake up. It's not happening, because there's this world trauma and disassociation and belief systems that have been perpetuated. And then there's the patterns of how much we've, through the generations, continued to embody those patterns. And that's, we're in it. I mean, we have to do that work, both for us individually and for the generations that have, put it on us to do it.
It's amazing how much disassociation and disconnection is in the system of all of us. And then, I remember I can really relate to you. I was born not trusting anybody as well. But when I really did my homework on my system, I realized that that was because I lost two twins in the womb. And that was like, I don't trust God. I don't trust, why did you leave me? Why did you abandon me? So I had to work through those layers before I could get to the part that, well, actually, I'm not going to be the rebel destroyer, which I was. I was going against authority, but I was creating like with like frequency, more disconnection. My rebel was more, I'll burn the house down. And then I realized that, no, don't come from that place. That's a trauma base. And I realized, no, I can inspire, I can grow, I can learn from this. So for me, it was very important to know, part of the rules of the universe coming in for me was to know how to handle my rage, my anger, which is all separation, my destructive parts, and my dissociated parts. So I had to work through all these different levels, these layers within my system, and know how to navigate when they're coming up in my system, that I wasn't dumping it onto people. And that's very important for me, is to that I don't dump what does not belong to you. For example, if you trigger me, that I don't dump it onto you, but that belongs back further in my childhood. And that's what happens a lot. So for me, everything is an opportunity to grow, to transform what's coming up in my system. And the level of programming of how For example, when you open somebody's system up, when you get triggered, it's opening up all the trauma, which trauma is basically dissociation, it's disconnection, it's not creation at all. And when you open enough of it, you're dissociated, you're out of your system. And then, as you say, you need the fatter, protect me, protect me. Even if the fatter was abusing you, you're going to keep going back. And that is the authority. And that's what I saw a lot during the last years when the media was scaring, traumatizing people. They were really consciously opening people's systems up so they'd be in a dissociated state. So they will like, save me, you're the savior. And when you go in this inner child wound, because the inner child wound is only about self, because it's been, destroyed in a way or being abused so much. So the inner child will only want, it's only about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, I can save you, I can protect you, just do this, do that, you will do it. Um, and also to open up a system, like to open up, to really look at yourself, it's not easy because we've been trained to be in the toxicity rather than go deeper through that and see what's on the other side of it. So our nervous system is designed not to go there. Anytime there's deep change in my system, I have all these reasons why I shouldn't go there, I shouldn't do it. And they're very logical reasons why I shouldn't maybe go for a session with somebody. But I learned a long time ago, when that comes up, I know it's going to be an amazing session. So I'm going straight into it. But if I didn't know that, my emotions would say, no, it doesn't feel like it's right. It's not the right time. I don't feel good. It's not good for me, and that's a problem in the spiritual world, is that they say, oh, it doesn't feel right. It's not the right time. For me, it's like, well, that's actually your system reacting to what actually is going to be changed in your life. So this is the time I go straight into it. So you need to learn how to dissociate between really what is your knowing and then really what is your body, reacting your emotions. Because for me, there you have your spirit, but if your body's been traumatized, your body's another spirit or another, if you see it as another being that doesn't trust your spirit.
Right.
So it's disconnected. So the body, of course, will say, no, don't go there. I can't experience that devastation again. And then a lot of people in the spiritual world are believing that part, saying, doesn't feel right, it's not in flow. No, it's your system reacting, it's your body reacting to what's going to be cleared within you.
So it's interesting you bring that up because for those who are watching this, Damien and I had a private conversation just recently, and where I brought up this idea that you know in the trauma work that I've been doing all my life, I start to see some of the nuances, some of the minutia, some of the very delicate ways a traumatized nervous system acts in response to the world versus acting from authenticity. So when I hear you say, yeah, it's not the right time, what feels what happens to me when I hear that is that's the trauma responding to the world, always responding to a threat, to a challenge, to something that will bring, that will unseat the traumatic pattern that has stayed in the system and driven you for so many decades so that you could survive, but doesn't really help you thrive. And then, how do we get to that place where we recognize the minutia, the smallest ways in which our responses to the world are actually based because of a trauma, and that we're so used to chaos, we're so used to violence, we're so used to abuse, we're so used to neglect or abandonment or violation that we find ways to cope by responding in a trauma, not even knowing it. And that's what I mean by the nuances, because you could see the big ones where the big responses are definitely reactions to the world as a fail-safe mechanism to survive. But then when you start peeling it away and peeling it away, you start to see the more subtle ways in which, things you say and things you do, or things I say and things I do, are based still in reactions to the world rather than in authenticity. Not the word inauthenticity, but in an authentic way. And that's really the subtlety. And you and I have talked about it for a couple of days now, and it's always peeling that onion and really finessing into, all right, what are the big ways in which the things we say, the things we do are reactions to the world based in a traumatized nervous system or based from a traumatized nervous system that may be ancestral and patterned that we've brought in. And what are the ways in which we settle back and can really hear and feel the voices of our authenticity. And what I've had to learn over the years, that if the answer starts from here to here, it's probably not the authenticity. It's probably more of the patterned reaction from a trauma space. But if the answer is from here and down, chances are there might be a little bit more authenticity because we're coming from a place that hopefully provides the correct safety and the correct grounding and the correct, feeling from the earth that allows us to act not in reaction anymore, but in a place of I, and not big I, but I soft I gentle I, authentic.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. It's interesting what yeah, it's so often I heard it during the week when I'm doing sessions, like people, and I've done this myself, where they're saying, I was so healthy, it was amazing, I'm at the best stage of my life, and then they have an accident, you know. So I remember that so many times myself of, thinking I feel great, I'm good with my body, I love my body, and then I have an accident. So it's these sabotage parts of us that pulls us back in. And really this state of consciousness within us as well is it's so incredible how much we are programmed. And as you say, like for me it was really fireworks when I first started doing this work. I was like a lot of dramatic changes, and it's interesting, I found the deepest changes are the very subtle changes. And
Mhm.
that's here, for example, I'm living in a forest and I'm watching nature all the time. And they're the subtle messages of spirit communicating to us. So I don't need to have that accident, and I don't need to go to that place, or I shouldn't eat that, or I should make that choice or change. So spirit is very, very subtle, and we were desensitized through heavy metals and mercury and different things from aldehyde and all that from our antenna. So really, we are like an antenna of spirit, but then it was masked over with heavy metals and impurities and belief systems, programming, trauma-based, and in the emotional body. I did one last week on the emotional body. So it's like you have a pure frequency, but it's been sent out through this distorted fields. And then people wonder why I'm not getting love back, why people are behaving like that. Well, you're sending that frequency out to the universe with the distortion in it, or maybe you got a hit as a child. So this is the information on a frequency level we're sending out. And when we really bring consciousness to our nervous system and really accept to embody within the nervous system and then back into the system and work through the trauma-based responses and make new choices, which is incredible now. Some people say, oh my God, I didn't do any of the work. That's a lot of work. But I would say at the moment, it's an incredible time to start the work if you haven't already, because the results are very fast at the moment. Like I remember 10, 20 years back, I would have to work on topics for weeks, but now I can do it in almost moments. So it's very, very fast field at the moment, because I feel that spirit wants us to embody. There's a huge awakening. There's a veil's been released of manipulation, destruction, war. All these things are coming up, but they're surfacing. But that was all within us.
Mhm.
So for me, I always reflect everything like the war. Where's the war within me? Because it's always in me. Where's the manipulation within me? Now, it may be that the war The work could be on any level of frequency within me from my childhood. It could be a war in my immune system. It could be a war from my ancestors. It could be a war from past life, but it's within me. And then when I change that frequency, I do change the field around me as well. It's a ripple effect, inner and outer world.
But Damien, you and I both know that when a child begins life, all rewards come from the outside. And the development of the child is to seek happiness from outside. And then you add whatever were brought in, whatever patterns are brought in, and then you add whatever traumas and neglects and violations there are. And we spend most of our childhood and young adulthood looking for the fillers, looking for things from outside. And because of the pain, whether we realize it or not, the pain is what's motivating more of the seeking of things from the outside. And, it's sort of the definition of insanity. I know it's, what I had to look at in my seeking of things from the outside to realize that, I was literally practicing the definition of insanity. The pain was there, the anger was there, the rage was there, the emptiness was there. And I kept trying to find ways from the outside to make it better. And it never worked, whether it was a person, a food, a practice, a work, or something that I could just get my hands on to fill from the outside. And, no matter how many times we can look at others and say, it doesn't come from the outside. People who are in whatever process they're in are going to look at you and go, yeah, that's not going to work for me. Because the desire, the need, the way life starts is to seek from the outside. And then if you're a parent who is solving from the outside, correcting from the outside, and feeding from the outside, and making sure you don't feel bad because we're going to distract you from the outside, then you really don't have an inner process. Then you're really moving towards this need for an authority, for an object, for a person, for an institution, for a government, for an elected official, for a medical society, for a doctor, for a healer to do the work for you. And that, how do you teach? How do you teach other than to just move through the process or transform, as you're talking about, because we're moving so rapidly, where the answers don't come from the outside? And that all of the indignation, all the pain, all the insistence that it has to come from the outside is only part of the reaction to the world again, and not sitting back and saying, I really need to look at what I'm not capable of here. I really need to look at what I've not developed here. I really need to look at what I want to practice here so that I can get good at it, instead of denying that that process is necessary and just insisting that it has to come from the outside.
It's interesting as you're talking. For me, the keys were first the genetic place. Then always the second part would be mom and dad wounds. Mom, please look at me and authentic love to me. There's words I work with to bring you back into alignment, because most people are there fixing themselves so daddy loves me or daddy and mommy will come back together again. So these wounds have to be worked with as well, because unless they're worked with, you're doing things, chargy work from the wrong place. I want to be a good boy, good girl for mommy and daddy to love me. So there's that aspect. But for me, it's about really honoring that I'm fully responsible for every decision, everything I do in life, and every choice. And I can change the systems, but it's really self-responsibility in my system. And from that point, then I sort of, we can, this is the missing piece for many people or even very successful people I work with, that they're missing this part, that they're still being successful for mom and dad, or they're acting out of these old trauma-based wounds because mom is Mother Earth, dad is creator. So you're going to be out of your channel. So once you're back in your channel, then you can start looking and mirroring into your system of saying, okay, I'm responsible for everything. Why did I say it like that? Why was I harsh? Why did I choose that? So you start questioning and working through those systems.
I don't know, Damien. I remember the earliest of years in doing this work when someone would say, and some of this is cruel, I get it. Someone would say, well, you did choose this pattern, or you did choose this life, or, it is your responsibility, or, you brought this on yourself, not in a blaming way, but, you you brought this. I mean, you attracted this. And you know, I'd be so enraged. And I just want to point out that when we, or at least I, felt like I have a history of being a victim, or an ancestry or a generational of being a victim, then anything that happens in life is going to feel as if we've been victimized and we didn't do it. Like, it's another level of disassociation. We did not participate in it. We did not attract it. We did not ask for it. We did not welcome it in. It just happened to us. And, again, these are some of the nuances that I've found are what we're responsible for teasing out while we're working through that trauma. Because the trauma, again, it forces us to react to the world instead of find the I person, and what would the I person do. And at least in my work with myself and in the office, we don't start life a lot knowing I. And especially if children are being raised where everything is done for them, it's solved for them, it's fixed, it's corrected, there's much less of an I developed. Because what happens when they go to a situation where no one's there to fix, solve, correct, or answer? There's no I. There's no, well, how do I find the ability? How do I find the skills? Where do I find the I that's responsible for now doing it myself? And so going forward, if we want to raise a new generation of kids, um, I think it's really important that we let them struggle a little bit, that we let them toil, and we provide safety, but we provide a place of curiosity and safety where if they get something wrong, we sit back and we say, okay, what do you want to do? You want to try it again?
It's
Instead
it's
of instead of giving the answer, and these are the instructions, and this is how it needs to be done so that you don't hurt yourself or you don't fail.
yeah, it's interesting. Many things are coming up when you're talking,
I
and
don't
one that comes up for me is really about, you know, for me, the key for me with everything, these parts, was accepting it's present without judging it. So accepting I'm enraged at this present moment, accepting I'm dissociating at this moment, accepting I don't feel good in my body at this moment. I don't want to be here. So it's going to a state of accepting of everything that is in this time and space. And then the rest is up to the universe, because then the transformation starts. And to get that to that acceptance is really a journey. But as you're talking there about, maybe we need to suffer a little, it's interesting. I'm here in Kenya and in Nairobi, and there's in Kibera, in one of the slums, there's a school which one of my friends created, and that's for young girls from the slums. And these girls are girls who were raped at such a young age by their father or by a neighbor. And when I went into the school to the girls, it was like, I've never met a being like them. Normally the girls here, they look down, they're shy. They're standing up and they're asking questions. I stood in front of the class, and the questions they were asking me were like straight to the point, and they're leaders, and it's almost like their systems were so smashed that they know they have two choices. I either go down one lane or I go down the other. And really, for me, I've never seen so powerful leaders, conscious, compassionate, as the children I've been around, um, and powerful, really powerful. And that's what I'm seeing a lot here. Actually, is the deeper the destruction, the more of heaven, of consciousness is in the person by choice, not everybody. You can go, it's interesting, a friend of mine was saying that, he had the choice living, being brought up there, to go into drugs or to go into reading a book, So he self-taught himself because
Right.
he says, okay, otherwise I'm just going to go into drugs. So there's a choice in the system, and I see it in the libraries there that the kids are in, they're teaching each other in the libraries. And it's really, that is where my awakening started, was when my system was smashed and broken down, and I needed to allow myself to fall. I didn't want to, but to be fall. And this broke through the layers of protection that was in my system. So, it's interesting. I have the same thing when I work with somebody. I see them like almost like teaching a child how to cycle a bike. I let them go. And even if you fall, I know you're going to be okay because you can handle it. And you're going to learn from that experience. And I've given you everything that you need on that journey. So I think it's important to allow us, and that was a huge key for me in the work that I do, is to allow the people I'm supporting to fall into what's in their system, to not grab the pain, let them go into it. And that is the transformation. That is the discharge of the frozen emotional body. And then spirit comes in, and then the nervous system realizes, oh, actually, it's not so bad here. I can stay here. So I think that's a really important key, what you said about, we started protecting too much or smothering too much, maybe the kids, and now they're disconnected in the iPhones and dissociated and not communicating with each other. So for me, it's going back to basics,
Yeah.
really go to basics, and to go back to, the way we used to play, and I can see it here, and just making toys ourselves or playing in the dirt or, communicating with each other. So I feel that everything now is about deprogramming our systems to go back to basics, and it's all here. I know we always say that everything's inside you, but if you're not in your body, the
Right.
key for transformation is inside you. Okay. So I remember when I started this work, I was amazing up here, but I couldn't get into the body because I had so much trauma in my body from my childhood. So it was about working through the trauma that was in my body so my spirit could come down. And the more I came in, the more I create the heaven and earth state. I'm not saying my life is fantastic, but it gets easier, or you can deal with it in a more coherent way. Um, so it's a puzzle, and there's so many ways on this journey. What's key, and I know we spoke about this a lot in the past, is, for me to develop, I need to find the ones, and this is, if you go back in history, there was always archetypes of leaders who was in the community with virtues, strong virtues. And those strong virtues would help you accept yourself by being around that person. And that's what I noticed years ago. I realized there's not many people with virtues anymore. And that's why I had to go back into archetypal blueprints of leaders from the past who was really got the virtues. Also, what's missing from the system, which I'm always interested in, that's why I love you, Larry, as well, is that you've worked your system yourself. Okay. So you have the information in your system, in your vibrational field. So simply this conversation and connecting with you, you're going to help my soul to develop. And I want to be around people who have virtues in their system and they're specialists in certain fields. They're the keys, the gatekeepers with the virtues that can, if you didn't have it from your mom and dad, which most of us don't, and we need to accept we can't get it from mom and dad or because it's too heavy for them, I can find people around me or people around, or I work with nature a lot to help me remember myself or activate a part of my soul that hasn't been developed yet. So there's a lot of knowledge through the internet and in the scene. We're bombarded with a lot of content, which is treasure. But if it's in the wrong hands, and what I mean by the wrong hands is they haven't worked it in their system, that's coming from the mind. That is not coherent and that is not creation. So for me, I want to find the gatekeepers who have the virtues of the different topics. There's nobody perfect here. We all have topics. But if you're a specialist, in a certain field and you've worked that field within you, I'm very interested in being, hanging out with you or listening to you or going to your lectures because I know you have keys which I haven't developed. And by being around you, being present with you, by listening to you, by feeling you, I know I will develop because you've earned it, you've worked it in your system, and you have embodied what you're teaching. The embodiment for me is very important, cellular embodiment of your teaching. For me, I'm not interested if you have not embodied that information within your system. Otherwise, it's coming from the mind. That's my personal experience.
No, I love that you said that because it is rare for me to find humans who actually embody it. I hear a lot of it spoken, but I don't feel a lot of it. And over the years, I often say somewhat painfully that I never really had mentors. I never really had anybody outside of me. And of course, it was, you know, it angered me because, I was looking for some kind of reflection, some kind of assistance and some kind of support. But luckily, I worked with enough key people who would embody exactly what you're talking about and would allow me to sort of relax my system in their presence so that I could do that work to find it myself. And I wanna dovetail something that you said, um, because because in I don't think that we live in a world where sitting with rage, sitting with anxiety, sitting with discomfort, sitting with pain is actually welcomed. I think it's actually discouraged. And so the rescue, paradigm, which is, you don't have to be sick, we have a drug. You don't have to be fat, we have a surgery. You don't have to be anxious, we have a medication. You don't have to get an infection, we have a shot. You don't, I mean, you can steal and don't worry, we won't send you to jail. I mean, you could do all these uncomfortable things, and there's always a rescuer outside of you to help you go back to the same life that you can go back to because you're not being encouraged to take responsibility. And so one of the things that I try to teach, and again, the kids in the practice were the ones who helped me heal this as I was teaching it over the years. I would see kids who were crying, and I would see kids who were uncomfortable, and I would watch the parents' reaction to their discomfort by either distracting them or picking them up when they didn't need to be picked up. And I realized how tense I would get. And ultimately, what became clear to me was that comfort exists and discomfort exists, but neither lasts. And if you preferentially raise a child to only experience comfort, well, you're stealing 50% of life. In fact, you're stealing the part of life that teaches us how to thrive, how to succeed. Nobody succeeds through success. You succeed through failure. And discomfort is somewhat of a failure. It's like, bummer. And when kids start out life, their brains are programmed. I want equals I get or I die. I mean, that's the kind of brain chemistry that we all start out with in life. And we ultimately have to get to an endpoint where I want equals I don't always get equals, I'm okay. I didn't die. Actually, life is good. I have options. There's another way for me to figure this out. Something could be good instead of great. And when I watch how kids are being brought up, I see the discomfort aborted. And so I'll give an example. I had a 3-year-old boy in the office with a 1-year-old brother, and I was examining the 1-year-old. The 3-year-old wanted to go out, and he starts crying and insisting, wanting to get out that door. And as soon as he starts crying, the mother swoops in and says, "Oh, I have crayons for you." And I looked at her in my New York fashion. I have to say, there's a New York fashion here. And I looked at her and said, "What are you doing?" And she was taken aback. And I looked at the kid who was now on the floor screaming. And I said, "I know, buddy. I know. I get it. I know you want to go outside, but I need you to stay in here." And he stopped crying and he looked up at me as if I had touched a part of him. And then he started crying some more. And all I did was say, "Yeah, I know this is really tough for you. I get it, but I still can't let you go outside." He stopped crying and then he played in the room. And what I did for him, which again, I only learned because it was the process I had to do for me in my working through the discomforts, but I learned it from the kids and from learning child development. What I did for him was just acknowledge him. And so that is the sitting with the discomfort, sitting with the pain, sitting with the rage, not swooping it or not medicating it or anesthetizing it or pacifying it, but just sitting with it and parenting it and saying, "Yeah, I know, buddy, I get it. Sitting with you, I acknowledge you," and then allowing it to uh, be resolved because he processed the beginning, the middle, and the end of discomfort and came to an awareness that he wasn't going to die if he didn't go outside, that he had choices, even at the age of 3. And what I see in my practice over the years and still is that that kid's not allowed to cry. That kid's not allowed to be uncomfortable. He's not allowed to be enraged. He's not allowed to be pissed because, oh, we have to make it all better and solve it. And in that moment, what his system learned was I want equals I don't always get, and I won't die. And that's really, to me, some of the greatest teachings of how to work through traumas and is to sit with it. And I'll tell you, it's hard. It's just hard to sit with it because there's always that desire, that yearning, that craving for something outside to fill it, knowing full well that if there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, you get a transformation by recognizing I made it. And that's a self-esteem booster. That's a spirit booster. That's an identity booster. It just takes time for some people, but you have to be willing to recognize comfort exists, discomfort exists, but neither lasts.
It's interesting. I used to describe that when I was doing workshops as well in a different way. That inner child crying is within all of us. And for me, for example, I'm working with a large group. If the inner child part that's crying comes up in the group and I only focus on that child, I lose the group. Okay.
Mhm.
That represents us. So, and vice versa. If I push away that crying child, I've disconnected from myself as well. So for
Mhm.
me, it's about accepting the child is crying, the child is uncomfortable, it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel good. It wants to go outside. So accepting all those parts and then accepting that there's an incredible being in that child,
Mhm.
that has so much more awareness in the system. And that's what you recognized in the system. So when I do this with everybody I meet, I realize that, we're all made up of different inner child wounds. And I accept all those parts, and I'm not afraid to see them in somebody. That's very important. That, for me in the beginning, it was like I could see people's potential, but I was wishful thinking, blind in trust, blind in faith that they would live that. Most people don't want to live their potential. Most people are not ready to live their potential or ready to face that pain because they need to work through it to get to that point. So for me, it's to work through, to accept all that resistance, all that pain, all that dissociation, all the parts of the personality level are here, but also there's incredible
Mm.
aspects of that being, which is incredible as well. And if I accept them all equally, the key is equally, without saying that's better than this one. No, the child crying is just as important as the higher self. So if you see them all as equal and accept them with no judgments, pure compassion, then there's a transformation within the system because now you've connected to the frequency of what that child is crying about. And that child needs to feel felt, heard, seen, and respected in the system. So there's that for me is the key for transformation in all systems. And yeah, it's something else was coming true. But yeah, that's for me really, really key. And also with parenting, I see it a lot is that, the child is activating the child within the parent, and then
Oh, yeah.
the inner child of the parent is against the child. And especially for example, in a divorce or separation, you often see them using the children in a very manipulating way. The reason is because the parent's inner child is active and they're using the other child as an instrument to pay back or revenge in the
Right.
system. So this acceptance part for me is really key of how to be more inclusive of yourself, but also the ones around you. And from that, something magical usually happens. Something transforms. And we're
But
we're programmed not to go into that fear and not to go near it. And that's another aspect I just wanted to bring up. Just is the part where this positive thinking and don't be around anyone who's very emotional or who's very angry. So for me, that is toxic. You know, so I know I trigger a lot of people, for example, when you're in front of somebody who's worked through their topics and they're facing you, your system will freak out and not want to be near that person. And your system will make excuses up in the system why you shouldn't be around that person. But the reality is that person can mirror something in you which you haven't resolved in your system yet. And there's a lot of this positive part, law of attraction going on. But the law of attraction for me is, well, it starts from the inside and work through all the different layers. And what is that person triggering within me? Why I'm so triggered from that person? And usually, if you pick someone who's really triggering you or a topic in the world which you're fighting for, you'll find that within you. It's just you're embarrassed or ashamed to go there or afraid to go there. So we're all mirrors for each other to help us to find ourselves and to resolve. So, and those biggest points are usually the uncomfortable people to be around, the
oh, yeah.
triggering to be around, not the comfortable ones to be around, are the ones who maybe have something in you that you don't want to address, you don't want to see, you don't want to hear, you don't want to feel.
Right. So when I see that situation with the mother and the son, um, you know, I there's a lot that's been written about this, Damien, about parents needing to be the calm for their children's storms. And what I often will see is that um, we're raising the adults who are having the kids who are unable to be in their calm around someone else's storm. And
Yeah.
so what ignited for this mother is I can't hold my own discomfort. I don't know how to deal with my own discomfort. And I'm going to have to deal with my discomfort by taking away your discomfort so that I could feel better. And one of the phrases I once learned was, the definition of codependency is managing other people's lives so that you can get your needs met. And what I'm seeing in the environment of parents is, and again, I know where it comes from because we're, with all the sex trafficking and all the child trafficking and all the kidnapping and all the abuse that we're learning about and the fear of letting your kid go out on the street the way we might have for 8 hours a day when we were kids to come back, at 6 o'clock for dinner and no one knew where we were, but we were gone all day. Those days are gone. So parents are definitely living in a very different environment. Now, I'm sure we can talk about why that has entered into the system of our societies, but this hovering over and making sure that every breath that children take is managed, and every bite that children take is managed, and every move that children make is managed. And so that the college student who can't write his or her own essay is having somebody hired to do it for them so that they can get into college, because if they did it themselves, they would fall in their faces. So we're going to have somebody to rescue you. Um, these there are many systems in our culture that have perpetuated this rescue, save, fix, and correct environment. And again, if we can sit with some of our discomfort, our rage, our pain, and be with it, the beginning, the middle, and an end, and actually find that that strength that's in us that's going to hold our hand. I remember the first time I started really doing some of this spirit work to deal with the anxiety, the pain, the rage, the fury. I would grab my other hand and squeeze so tightly just to hold on, because the wave of emotion that was moving through me was so intense that it was like, opening a door with a 80-mile-an-hour wind and just holding yourself down so you don't fly away. And I know that we all have some of that 80-mile-an-hour wind where we just could kill or we could destroy. And that's not a part of our systems to remove, but it's a part of our systems to move through, because there is a light at the end of that tunnel. There is a transformation that happens because it requires that higher self within us, that spirit, that connection to something higher, to hold our hands to move through. And the last thing I'll say is that I often, when I finally thought I figured out a little bit of the game of life, which again is a joke, but I think I figured something out, that we come into the world purposely with a deficit, with a wound, with a trauma, with some kind of emptiness, because mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, uncle, babysitter, teacher, pastor stripped something from us or didn't give us something. And that's because we as individuals have to fill in the gaps of what a mom and a dad would do to that child that didn't get or got stolen from when we were growing up. And once I started to understand, I'm still in process, obviously, because I'm alive. But once I started to understand that I could be the mom and dad I didn't have, or I could do the healing and the guidance and the parenting that wasn't there or was stripped or was, abandoned or whatever it was, that I actually could build that connection to something greater. And I could see the transformation in the system because I was connecting to my responsibility, as you said, and my taking it on and not seeking it from the outside. And it's just a big process. And we need to start doing that with the kids. I mean, if we're going to change how we got here, if we're going to build kids who are going to be more resilient. When they ask a question, I want you to say to the kid, I don't know, what do you think? Because I want to see what's processing in the kid. I don't want the kid to regurgitate what I answered, because then it's not ownership of the kid for the kid. It's just transference to the other person. And that's really why we're here, is because we're transferring our answers. We're grabbing it from outside instead of achieving it from the inside.
Beautiful. And also, like, creation for me is, it's messy, to have a child, to birth a child is messy. It's not so beautiful experience. It's messy. There's blood and everything else there. So it's like, it's a mess. So for me to create something, okay, I commit to it, I bring it through, I commit to it, I go through the work, the focus, the dedication, the commitment, taking action, working through my fears, through the chaos. And then before I know it, there's a new child here. So that is nature. That is normal. But we've been sort of like programmed to think it's not normal. It's like we're all beautiful. I know on our Instagram or filters or the Botox or whatever, and you're showing your perfect lifestyle. But really, when you talk to people you see on Instagram, their lifestyle is nothing to what they're putting out to the public. It's completely different. So nature is naturally, creation has everything mixed in together, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of life. It's messy, it's challenging, it's hard, it's scary. And then you go into the courage, you learn courage then to go over those fears, to go through it, and then you start connecting to something incredible. And I remember when I first started riding horses, it's like I was faking it, go on kicking him or whatever, move, and the horse wouldn't move because the horse knew I was lying, I was cheating in the system, I was faking it. So it wasn't until I became one with the horse and I was jumping or cantering, it was like we became one, but there's no faking it in the system. And that's where, you connect to something within inside us. And that's I know, the curiosity to life, to experimenting, to messing up and recreating and having a fall and getting up again. It's like that is life. It's not all so pretty. It's messy. It's everything. And those moments are sacred and I wouldn't change any of them. So I feel it's about letting all of us have our experience. Let the kids have their experience. Let them have their outbursts and feel them, hear them, and ask questions. And as I say, how do you feel? What's going on? So I feel the whole teaching system has to be reset in a
Oh,
system. Everything needs to be reset at the moment, I feel, and going back to basics, who we really are. And there's incredible opportunities here, and there's incredible time to be here, and there's an incredible stripping away of systems. And for me, a huge key in this whole realizations was that I'm very comfortable with chaos because I know chaos is when all my programming has been, my programming, meaning my safety nets, which was keeping me in the old versions of Damien, are being stripped away. And there's a point where I just have to give space and allowance and go for a walk in nature, take a breather. And then before I know it, I've just gone to another level of consciousness. So usually people feel the chaos and they try to go back. There's something wrong. It's not in flow. It's not the right time. No, for me, I'm very comfortable with chaos because I know it's the end of cycles. So I
right.
start creating, but near the end, chaos always pops up. And there's a lot of chaos in the world at the moment because there's a huge transformation happening. So I'd say stay in it. When you see the chaos, stay in your center, be with yourself. You don't need to go so detailed about what really is happening here. Just know deep down in your heart, all is good, all is okay. Something is shifting, something is transforming. And yeah,
Comfort exists, chaos
yeah,
exists.
yeah,
Neither lasts.
exactly.
Neither lasts. Great.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That was, yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
You're I feel we'll do it again sometime. That
Hope
was
so.
really lots of jewels.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Thank you, Larry. That was really great. Thank you, everyone. Take care.